Hey guys, my name is Gene. I am a corporate pilot. I'm a captain on the Pilatus PC-12 Legacy and NG models. And I wanted to make a video about the flight planning process for a Pilatus PC-12 flight in the Part 91 corporate environment, which is the environment that I fly in. And my hope is that this will give pilots some good tips and tricks that might not be comfortable with flight planning, whether you're a student pilot in flight school or a private pilot, or maybe you've got your first professional flying job and you're just starting to get into more advanced or real-world flight planning scenarios. I hope that this video can help you out and give you some tips and tricks. And this is just what I do. Of course, everybody does the flight planning process their own way. There are a lot of different ways to do this right. This is just my way. So having said that, let's get into it. So I'm going to probably end up dividing this into a series of videos, because otherwise it would be super long and probably excruciatingly boring, and I don't want to put anybody to sleep. And so probably this first video here, I'll just go over some of the pre-flight planning. So this would just cover what I would do if I was assigned a trip and I had the details about the trip, such as the aircraft I was flying, the number of passengers, and of course the departure and the destination, and departure time. And so when I get assigned trips in the real world, this is basically what I do. So I come here, I start, you can see I've got some tabs open up here at the top. I've got the Aviation Weather Center here, which is where I do all my weather self-briefings. I've got Sky Vector here, which is what I use for some of my initial planning for route. And then I've got my flightplan.com account up, FAA.gov for Nodems and Tfrs, and then AirNav for FBO information. And this is pretty much everything that I use. I do use ForeFlight in the airplane on an iPad, but for the flight planning process, this is pretty much what I use. So in this scenario, I'll just make up a hypothetical flight here, and let's say that check the schedule, and it looks like I've got a trip assigned in the PC-12 single pilot from Stinson. This is San Antonio. If you guys aren't familiar, I'll zoom way out so you can see where we are. San Antonio is way down here, and Stinson is on the south end of San Antonio right here. So I'm going to plot a point on that, and then let's say we're heading up to, let's see, Lubbock, right here, Lubbock, Texas. So plot those points on there. We'll get kind of a general look at the route of flight, and that's 311 nautical miles, so it's not a particularly long leg, but it's also not particularly short. So mid-range leg here, and it looks like typically what I'll do first is I'll just zoom out and I'll see what it looks like, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of complex airspace between the two airports. It doesn't look like there's anything really of concern in terms of terrain, or of course like extended overwater type stuff, anything that would really make this a little bit more complicated. So probably this is just going to be a direct route, but you never just want to assume that you're going to fly direct, although most of the time you will. You want to at least check these considerations to make sure that filing direct is going to be prudent. So yeah, we'll just kind of zoom in here and get a general idea of the airspace, and again the terrain. Like I said, the terrain isn't much of a factor on this particular leg, but so as we take off, we're departing from a Class Delta airspace airport here, and then we're going to transition through a Class Charlie airspace. Of course, we're going to be IFR, so we don't care about that stuff. So no problem there. We're going to skirt along the east side of the Randolph MOAs. Looks like we're not going to actually be in those. And by the way, even for an IFR flight, you'll notice that I am using the VFR sectional here. And this is really the best way to start even for an IFR flight, just to get a general sense of the airspace and the terrain. I will also switch over here to the low and route chart eventually, and also the high and route chart depending on what altitude I'm going up to. But I like to start on the with the sectional here. So anyway, moving right along. So we're just going to scoot on up here and see what we got. Looks like there's some sort of TFR that's going active there. Again, it's west of our route of flight. We're not too worried about it. We are grazing this Brownwood 4 MOA, and remember to think vertically and three-dimensionally here. These have vertical dimensions, so In just a minute, we'll come back and we'll check the vertical dimensions of that MOA. Most of the time in the PC-12, you're operating above 18,000 feet for legs of this length, which means that you're actually above the MOAs. MOAs extend to 17,999 feet MSL technically, so oftentimes on top of MOAs, you'll have ATCAs, which are ATC assigned airspace areas that are active. They're basically Class A extensions of the MOAs, and sometimes those can go up to flight level 230 or even higher, so we'll check that in a minute, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a big deal. And let's see, here's a big MOA we're going through. The Lancer MOA is definitely going to be a factor. Even if, again, even if we're above it, we are going to be descending through that because you can see the Lubbock is just right here beyond it. So we'll definitely want to make sure this is not active. Remember that if a MOA is active in your IFR, that you cannot fly through that MOA, and ATC will route you around it. So, you can, some guys are lazy and they just file direct no matter what. And then if the ATC gives them a reroute, they take the reroute. I like to be more sort of out ahead of it than that and more situationally aware to where I'm being proactive and picking the route that I want to fly or that I know that I'm probably going to fly so that I can plan my flight better in terms of how much fuel I need to take. Sometimes even, the weather might be a factor. If, say this MOA is active and I can't fly through here and I'm going to have to come, way out over here or something. In Texas, sometimes there are thunderstorms, and that might be something you'd want to look at. So, not a big deal, but generally speaking, I like to file the route that I actually think that I'm going to fly, and not just take what ATC gives me. So I was going to check the vertical dimensions of the Lancer MOA here, and so in order to do that, we actually have to refer to the sectional chart for this is probably the Dallas-Fort Worth sectional chart, and I've got another tab open with that. That's San Antonio. There you go, and if you go over here to the old panel, just like the old days here, we're going to look up the Lancer MOA. Here it is, and you can see the altitude is, the floor is 6,200 MSL and extends all the way up to Class A airspace, 18,000 feet. So that is going to be a factor for us, and probably it's not going to be active. So let's assume that this is the night before the flight, and as you can see here, it is very late, 2:44 in the morning. I am a night owl. I do stay up late. And we're going to be departing early the next morning. On the weekends, typically military airspace tends not to be active. And you can see here with the Lancer MOA, the typical times of use are Monday through Friday. So chances are this MOA is going to be cold for our weekend flight here. But of course, we'd still want to check the Nodems to make sure of that the day of the departure. But probably not a factor there just because of the day of the week. And then the other, the MOA down here, but I think was the Brownwood. Yeah, Brownwood 4. So again, we'll go down to the special use airspace panel, and the Brownwood MOA is 13,002, but not including flight level 180. And that's just 7 a.m. to 2200 local time. Doesn't say Monday through Friday on that one. So again, we'll just check to make sure those are cold. So we'll probably be above that one. Not a big deal with these, but we'll just double check. And to do that, I go over here to the, this is FAA.gov, just the home page, and I'll pull up the temporary flight restrictions page. And on the end here, you can see this SUA link for special use airspace. You click that, and it'll bring up a handy dandy map that you can use to check the special use airspace areas along your route to see if they're active. So generally speaking, when you're looking at this map, the hotter the color, the more active or the more of a concern the airspace is. And I don't see any red at all. We can zoom in a little bit down here. And this is going to pull up all the active airspace in my viewing area here. And so I don't see either of those MOAs listed. And this will give you about 24 hours out. So again, not surprised since tomorrow is Saturday that those aren't going to be active, but this is where we would double check to make sure that those MOAs were not going to be active. So it looks like those are not a problem for us. Excuse me. So I'll close that, head back over here. And again, it looks like the terrain does rise as we fly west here, which is kind of how it gets out in West Texas. You get out in kind of to some desert area, and Lubbock is certainly West Texas. So the elevation here you can see is actually about 30, I think that was about 3,300 feet. Yeah, 3282. So that's relatively high elevation out there. But no real mountainous terrain or anything until you get way out here into New Mexico. So certainly no terrain concerns, just some gradually sloping rising terrain as we fly northwest there. No overwater issues to be concerned with. You don't typically have to worry about that stuff unless you're crossing the Gulf down here or flying over the Great Lakes. So yeah, it looks like a pretty simple route. And then also you can go over here to the high en route chart, since we are going to be operating above 18,000 feet in the high altitude stratum. It's not a bad idea to just glance at the high en route chart real quick and make sure there's no restricted areas or anything up here that you missed on the sectional. So really nothing. This also gives you a good opportunity to see which centers you're going to be flying through. So we depart in Houston Center and then we cross into Fort Worth Center. You can see there on the little line there. So, and I'll go back to the VFR sectional chart there. So yeah, it looks like we'll probably just file direct. We can expect to fly direct. I don't see any reason that we couldn't. And another thing that you do want to check is to make sure, especially if you're flying out of a high density terminal area, a Class C or a Class B terminal area. So again, we're not flying out of the primary Class C airport down here at San Antonio, but we're transitioning through that area. So we want to check to see if there are any SIDs or DPs that we might want to be prepared to fly. And at Stinson, it looks like we do have a bunch. So why don't I open up another tab with the Stinson Airport information, and we'll look at these departure procedure charts. And you kind of just have to open them all. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it's just what we have to do. So looks like this one, and what I do, guys, to sift through this is I'll just open it up and see the general direction that it's going. So this one is going north. Here's the airport down here, but it's going more northeast, northeast. So that's not going to be applicable to us. So we're not going to fly that one. So I'll close that. That's continued. Here's the Alice 5. This is an RNAV SID, and oftentimes, oops, flipped it the wrong way. Oftentimes these are turbojet only. So I'll usually look in the notes section first. I actually don't see any restrictions on this one, so we could theoretically fly this one. And it does kind of go the right direction, doesn't it? It goes a little more northwest, the north-northwest, but we can see where this would spit us out. So we'd go to Treva, intersection up to Alice, and then on to Junction VOR. So why don't we go back here and I'll search for Junction, which is JCT, and we'll see if it's anywhere near our route line, and it is. So depending on the time of day and all that stuff, there's a decent chance, since we're going to be filing for a high altitude, that the ATC computer system would kick out that DP for us and put that into our routing. So why don't we just be proactive and go ahead and file for it? And there's no reason not to. It really only adds seconds to our route. So why don't we throw that in there? I'm just going to take us to the Junction VOR. SkyVector does this kind of cool thing where it can tell that it can tell which SID you're talking about if you just put the transition fix on there, and it'll throw it in. As you can see, it threw in the Alice 5 Junction on there for us, which is pretty cool, and it has that little bend in it at the Treva or whatever that was. And then we'll go probably direct after that, but remember too, we are flying into another Class C terminal area at Lubbock, actually the primary airport, so there could be stars up here. Typically you don't see a lot of stars at Class C airports. Typically those are at Class B airports, but it does happen sometimes, so why don't we take a look. So I'm just going to open up the tab for Lubbock, and we can close Stinson for a minute, go down here, and yeah, they don't have any SIDs or stars, so we're not going to have to worry about flying a star into Lubbock. So that looks like our routing. So that throwing that VOR in there didn't really change much, just took us a little bit farther west. No big changes to that. So there's our route. So we're going to file for the Alice 5 departure, Junction transition direct up to Lubbock. So now that we have our route figured out, we will move on to looking at some of the weather so we can pick a cruising altitude. So to do that, I come over here again to the Aviation Weather Center. In my opinion, this is the best resource for aviation weather. And I start with the big picture, so I'm going to look at the prog charts first. So I do all my own self-briefings, which is typically how most pilots do them these days. Back years ago, we would call on the phone, get a flight service briefing, but anymore we just do it ourselves. And I look at the surface plot first, And this is going to show you the highs, lows, and fronts, all that good stuff. So it gives you the big picture. It's always good to start big picture and work your way down to small picture when you're doing a briefing. So here, I'm going to just look and see, you know, again, we're going from about there where my mouse is to, I think, maybe right on there, which is where Lubbock is. So there's not a lot. You can see there's a dissipating cold front there. There's a little low pressure trough. These ISO bars show a pretty shallow pressure gradient, so there's probably not going to be a ton of wind or anything crazy. Probably just a little bit of turbulence at the lower altitudes due to this trough, this little low pressure wave here. But certainly nothing significant, no big deal, so should be pretty good weather. And of course that's right now, so if we're planning to depart in, you know, let's say 8 hours, then we're going to have to jump ahead here a little bit and look at the next couple of forecast charts. So this one here is valid at 12Z, as you can see up here, and right now the conversion for the central time zone is -6. So that would be at 6 a.m. This is the 6 a.m. forecast. You can see again we got a little low pressure, this dissipating cold front here, basically along our route of flight. So again, maybe a little bit of turbulence, some jiggles at the lower altitudes, probably nothing significant. And I'll jump ahead one more time, and then it completely goes away, and we just have, looks like kind of an area of high pressure out here, not a lot going on. So probably it's going to be pretty good flying conditions tomorrow. So really that gives you, you can see just from looking at the prog chart, a lot of information. And now let's imagine that we're going to, it's actually the morning of our departure, and we're going to do a full briefing. So I'm going to go look at the satellite. And I like to click on the actual area down here instead of looking at that crappy map that was just up there. And during the daytime, you can use visible moisture. Right now it's night, so it's just going to be black because the satellite can't see anything. And if you don't know, these are GOES satellites, which are geostationary satellites. They're up, they're just basically kind of almost hovering. I mean, they're not hovering, but they're staying at the same position over the Earth. So they'll just sit there and take pictures of the clouds all day. Now at night you can't see them, so you have to use the infrared. I like the color. And you can loop this. So you can see just probably maybe some stratus clouds up there, real shallow stuff, nothing significant at all. They're dissipating, drying out, and really that's pretty much it. So not a lot in terms of clouds. So then we'll go look at the radar, and there is nothing. What do you know? Absolutely nothing on the radar, so no precipitation of any kind. That's easy. Then I look at SIGMETs, come over here, zoom out a little bit. No SIGMETs at all. That's not uncommon. This will also display center weather advisories if there are any, but none of those right now. It's a quiet night. And we'll look at our airmets. So the PC-12 is it's kind of right on the top range of what you might consider a small aircraft, so I still look at the airmets for it. And let me turn everything off except for turbulence and wind shear here first. Well, I'll turn the surface wind on too. There you go. So this is high altitude turbulence airmet over here, and we've got some low altitude turbulence, low level wind shear over here in Arizona, but really nothing for our route of flight at all. So if we were going this way, I would click on that, and you can see the altitudes for that. The vertical dimensions are the base is at 18,000, the top's at 37. So that's right in the altitudes there for sure that the PC-12 typically cruises at. We're usually in the low 20s or mid 20s, so that would be a concern if we were going eastbound, but we're not. So we'll turn those off, and then we'll look at icing. Of course, we don't have any icing. We got nothing going on in Texas over here. Again, same deal. You would look at the altitudes associated with that. I don't care about the freezing level right now. And then any IFR, these are airmet Sierras for IFR conditions or mountain obscurations. And again, nothing along our route of flight. So we have no airmets, no SIGMETs, certainly no convective SIGMETs or center weather advisories. So we're sitting pretty here. There's really nothing going on out there tonight. It's clearing a million. So that's a good deal. I always look at the convective outlook chart. Real easy to just click on that and see if there's any thunderstorm activity forecast for the next 24 hours. No surprise, there's not. That's nice and clear for us. If there were, I would also look at the TCF and the ECFP as well. Those are like supplemental charts that'll show you a little bit more granular resolution for where you might expect to see convective activity, but of course nothing going on with that right now. And then same thing with icing. If I had any icing concerns, I would click on the icing tab here, and I would use this forecast icing product, which is excellent. And this is taking forever to load, but of course we're not going to see anything on it for Texas tonight. So there we go. Now it came up. And what this does is it just color codes the icing for you. So over here, the red stuff's really bad. That's SLD, which is super cool. Large droplets or freezing rain. That's really bad to fly through in any aircraft. And the darker the blue, the heavier the icing. So if we were going this way again, we would need to look at what altitudes that was a problem at, but we'd have some icing over there. So you can click up on the altitudes here to see where that icing starts and stops. So it looked like, you know, maybe between about 10 and 20,000 feet or so. It looks like some pretty decent icing over there in the deep south area, but luckily we're not going that way. Always checked pilot reports. It's under the aircraft reps tab up here. And at nighttime, you don't really see PIREPs because there just aren't a lot of aircraft flying. There's just literally one PIREP up here. During the daytime, this would be, have a whole bunch of reports, but this guy said it's smooth at 7,000. Woohoo! So no pertinent PIREPs for us. And then after that, we're going to go look at the METARs. And you can do some big picture first and just look at these station models and see if you have any IFR conditions around your route of flight or on your route of flight, and you can see, like, wow, everything's just VFR. There's a little bit of marginal over here in Houston, it looks like. That's what the blue is, and the red is IFR. But for the most part, especially going the direction we're going, it's good VFR weather conditions. And then we'll pull up the specific METARs and also the Tfrs. So we're going to type in our airports here, SSF, and Lubbock, and we're going to click the Include the TAF button, and we'll check out our METARs and our Tfrs. And I'm also going to throw San Antonio in there too, just so we get a TAF for the departure area. So here is Stinson currently issued on the 6th day, 0853 Zulu. It's an automated observation because the tower is closed, and it is a little breezy. 360 at 8 gusts, 17, visibility 10, 3,300 scattered, temperature 13, dew point 8, altimeter 3015. So other than, a little bit breezy, it's a beautiful night to fly, nice in VFR. Lubbock is currently 320 at 5, visibility 10, clear below 12,000, temperature 1, dew point -1, altimeter 3032. So kind of a close temp dew point spread. And at night, that you kind of want to keep an eye on that because that might mean that you could get some fog. But right now it's clear in a million, beautiful night up there. And we'll look at our forecasts. So I'm going to jump down here to the San Antonio TAF, and this was issued on the 6th day, 0845 Zulu, and it's valid 09Z to 12Z. So don't just skip over this stuff because you do want to know, when this TAF begins and ends, because sometimes that does make a difference. So what this means is the TAF is valid on the 6th day, which is it's March 6th right now, and at 09Z is when it starts. So we subtract the 6 hours, that's 3 a.m. So this was valid at 3 a.m. through the 7th day at 12Z, and which is the following day at 6 in the morning. And so starting at 3 in the morning, the ones forecast to be 350 at 12, better than 6, 3,000 scattered, temporarily between 10Z and 12Z, ceiling 3,000 broken. And then and then it'll actually go back to that line until 15Z, which would be 9 a.m. Then 1010 at 10, visibility better than 6, few clouds at 4,000. Then it goes to 020 at 9, better than 6, few clouds to 5,000. So, a little bit of a marginal stealing there from until 6 a.m. So again, after the sun comes up, looks like it's probably just going to burn that right off, and it should be a beautiful morning. Should be good VFR, no issues there, no reason to have any concern about the weather getting out of here. Should be a nice morning. And then, again, not a surprise, because we looked at the prog chart and we had that big picture going in. We knew that there wasn't any significant fronts or systems in there that were screwing things up. And then we'll look at Lubbock up here, issued on the 6th at 0520, valid from 6 a.m., or I'm sorry, 06Z, so that'd be midnight to 06Z, which is midnight on the 7th, so it's a 24-hour TAF. And the wind's variable at 4, better than the 6, sky clear until 6 a.m., wind variable at 6 statute miles with mist, few clouds at 300 feet. So sure enough, with that temperature dew point spread coming together, you're going to get a little bit of mist and fog type stuff going on until the sun comes up. And then you can see the next line is from 1600Z, which would be 10 a.m., wind 170 at 11, better than the 6, few clouds to 5,000, good VFR. So the sun will just come up and burn that right off. So by the time we get up there, if we're up there 9 or 10 in the morning, it should be clear in a million, beautiful day, no issues at all. And even if this does happen and lingers around, probably wouldn't be a huge deal. It wouldn't necessarily be below ILS minimums. So this is kind of something that it's a little bit of a red flag. You just kind of keep your feelers out on that. You know, check the weather again in the morning. Make sure that this hasn't gotten worse, because sometimes if fog does form, it can be a little bit persistent and it can screw up your trip in the morning. So, but certainly no significant issues right now to worry about. It looks like it's going to be a nice, easy flight, good VFR. And last but not least, we want to go over here to winds and temps. And actually, too, I wanted to mention the turbulence tab. This is kind of a finer points here, but especially when you're flying corporate with passengers, you want to always try to give them a good ride. So this forecast product is very valuable. This thing tends to be pretty accurate. So you click your time here. So let's go to 8 a.m. or that's 7 a.m. actually. Yeah, 7 a.m. tomorrow. And we'll click up to just, well, I'm going to click through the altitudes and we'll see what the turbulence looks like. So again, the darker the color, the bumpier the ride. So we'll just click up and you can see there's really not a whole lot going on. Now we're all the way up to flight level 230 there. And it kind of gets bumpier the higher we go. And again, but nothing significant. So about, I don't know, flight level 230 and up. Looks like maybe some bumps start happening. Probably we wouldn't go that high anyway going westbound. So we'll probably be at, you know, maybe flight level 200, but we'll check the winds aloft next for that. And we're going to see what cruising altitude would be optimal. So here's, and one of the things that I like to do is go to the temperature difference first here, and let's pick our time. So we'll do, this will be 9 a.m. So that's going to be like right in the middle of our flight time. And just basically see if the temperature is warmer than standard or if it's going to be colder than standard. And that the reason I like to know that is because it does affect the performance of the airplane, you know, and the cruise true airspeed that you can expect to get out of the airplane. So typically if it's warmer, the airplane will get a little bit better true airspeed at the lower altitudes. And if it's colder than ISA, you'll get a little bit better true airspeed if you climb to the higher altitudes. So that's what I like to, you know, look at this for. It looks like we probably want something pretty much kind of right in the middle for this day. And the airplane's pretty happy at about 180 or 200 right in the middle. So since we're going westbound, we have to be careful filing for 180, because if the altimeter is lower than 29 or 902, then we cannot use 180. So usually, if you don't know for sure if it's going to be high pressure, which in this case, remember we looked at that low pressure on the prog chart, it's probably not going to be that high of pressure, then we won't want to file for 180 because we're not going to get that anyway. So it looks like probably flight level 200, but let's take a look at the winds. Whoops, I was already there. Wind speed. And again, this is 9 a.m. We'll click up. So we're at 6,000 now, and you can see pretty, you know, decent tailwind. Then it shifts to more of a headwind. And it's almost a direct headwind the higher we go. And it definitely increases in velocity the higher we go, which again is typical, right? So probably actually we're going to want to go lower on this day. So we don't want to burn too much fuel and go too low. So we want to pick something that's economical. So it looks like maybe 25 knots a headwind, which is pretty bad at 12,000. And then it goes up to 30 knots at 15 and 40 knots at 18. So we don't really want to go, I would say maybe 14,000 or 16,000. There's probably not going to be a big difference. 14,000, the true airspeed is going to be a little bit lower down there, and we're going to burn more fuel. So the wind penalty isn't that great for going up, but we do get a little bit better true airspeed, and we will save a little bit of fuel so long as the headwind penalty doesn't extend our flight time. So I think probably 16,000 looks pretty good for this leg. So we'll go back here, and it's kind of something that, you know, you might have a tendency to take for granted in an airplane like a PC-12 or a turboprop or any turbine airplane where you're going to climb to a higher altitude, that, hey, I don't really have to worry about terrain or obstructions, but it's just good operating practice to make sure. So real easy way of doing this is to come here to the low and route chart. So you pull up the low and route chart and you have these Arokas, which are these brown numbers here, and these quadrangles of lat long. And they're going to show you the highest obstacle plus 2,000 feet in there in that quadrangle. So these are good, you know, minimum IFR altitudes. So 4,200, 4,242, 39, 42. You're just looking along at route 44, 44. These are going to go up as the terrain rises, of course, as we go west here, 47, 48. And we end at like 54, 58 out there. We're in 54. So anything above, basically 6,000, right, would be your minimum IFR altitude that you'd want to use across the entire leg. And of course, we wouldn't usually fly the PC-12 that low anyway, but certainly 16,000 gives us all kinds of clearance. And again, of course it does, but again, you wouldn't want to just skip that step. You always want to double check. And when you fly out here in the west, by the way, coming across the mountains and things, you will occasionally find Orokas that are pretty darn high. And you can see some of these here. Let's go up here. Here are some that are like 16.6 right there, 16.5, 16.8. So 16,000 isn't going to cut it up there. So anyway, we'll come back here, go back to the sectional. All right, so we planned our route. We've planned our altitude. We've gotten a weather self-briefing. So now we need to check the Nodems. So to do that, I'm going to come over here to the FAA homepage and go to our Regulations and Policies tab, and then Nodems. And this is basically telling you that you don't want to necessarily use only this as your official source of information. And back when I don't know if a lot of you guys may not have ever heard of DUATS. It was discontinued a few years ago, but DUATS was the Direct User Access Terminal System, and you could go on there and get, Nodems and a weather briefing. And it was an official source of information. So they're just saying, don't only use this. Now you can use flightplan.com. You can call Lockheed Martin, or I'm sorry, it's Leidos, Leidos Flight Service, and get a briefing. Don't just use this. Between you and me, this is pretty darn accurate. I've never had a problem with it. They're just kind of covering their asses there. All right, so we're going to come right here and just put in our airport identifier. So SSF is Stinson. And you can actually put in multiple identifiers, but if you do that when you hit search, it'll mash all the Nodems for the different airports together, and it makes them hard to read. So I just put one in at a time. And you can see we got quite a few here for Stinson. So over here, it's going to give you the location. Of course, these are all Stinson, the Nodem number, the class, start date, and end date. And then this is the actual Nodem over here, what you want to look at. And for Nodems, you do a whole lot of sifting. So like 90% of Nodems you don't really care about, but occasionally there are important ones that you really need to know. So we do a lot of sifting. So the first one here, OBST is obstruction or obstacle. So typically flying IFR, we don't really care about that stuff because we're using procedures that keep us away from these things. But you can glance at it and just see where it is. It's 8.3 nautical miles east of the field at 646 feet. So if you're at 700 AGL, 8 miles away, you got other problems, right? So we don't care about that. And these are IAP Nodems, Instrument Approach Procedure Nodems, so we're not planning to shoot an approach into Stinson. It should be VFR, even if we have to return. We don't care about those. This is ODP for an obstacle departure procedure, which amends the textual basic departure procedure and the terminal procedures publication. We're not planning on using that, so we don't care. IAP, again, we don't care. And then we have a bunch of Sydnodems, and we are flying the Alice 5 departure, so we do have to look at the Sydnodems. And this one actually right here, you can see is for the Alice 5 departure RNAV. And the Nodem is departure route description, takeoff runway 14, climb heading 137.36. That's pretty funny. To 1200, that would be MSL, before turning left, then is assigned by ATC for radar vectors. So what I do when I see a Nodem like that for a procedure is I come to the procedure and I see how it's different. And we need to actually pull up the other. I'm going to go down here to Stinson. Need to pull up the textual description of that one. The Alice 5, there we go. So right now, and let's see, the wind is forecast to be out of the north, right? So, and we actually want to pull up the airport diagram. We'll need that in a second anyway. So we'll probably take off, maybe 3.2, maybe 2.7, probably 3.2. And so this says takeoff runway 32, climb heading 317 degrees, which is the runway heading, or as assigned by ATC, expect radar vectors to Triva, thence on track 305, and then onto the transition. So let's see how that's different. And the Nodem, so it says departure route description, takeoff, so we're not taking off 14, right? So right there we know that we don't care. So we're just going to move right along. We don't even need that Nodem, and the rest of these are amending the other SIDs, so we don't care. Tower, 5 miles away, 600 feet, don't care. approach Nodem, don't care. Another tower 11 miles away, 12 miles away, 400 feet, don't care. A stack, probably don't, yep, 8 miles away, don't care. A tower 14 miles away, don't care. Service Nodem, automated weather broadcast system, is unserviceable. So that could be something that we might want to keep in mind, that the ASOS is down. If the tower is going to be open in the morning, then they'll have they'll have an ATIS that probably at this airport. Well, let's double check. And to full disclosure here, I'm not actually very familiar with Stinson. I just kind of pulled this out of my butt as an example. Yeah, they do have an ATIS. They're not all controlled airports are going to have an ATIS. Sometimes they'll have an ASOS, but this one does. So probably the tower is going to be open at 8, and probably they're going to have an ATIS on the air, so we'll be able to get our weather there. So not like a big deal, but maybe a heads up on that. And here's a letter to airmen from the San Antonio Approach Control Facility, the TRACON over there, about practice approaches within the San Antonio area, which we're not going to do tomorrow, so we don't care about that. So no pertinent Nodems for Stinson. And we'll go back and do Lubbock, which is KLBB. And we'll look at, let's see, we got apron terminal ramp closed to non-scheduled domestic and international air carrier ops. That doesn't apply to us. We're not that kind of operation. IEP, Lubbock Preston, Lubbock, the RNAV GPS Yankee 17 right has an amendment. Probably not going to end up shooting an approach to Lubbock at all, and if we do, we could always shoot the ILS, so I'm not going to concern myself with that. Here's a good one. So this is runway 17 left, 35 right closed, and here are the dates. Of course, you can look over here if you want them decoded, but I'm used to looking at this. So it's, let's see, looks like it's going to be 11/5. So this has been active since 2020 through, let's see, June 30th at 1500. So this is definitely active. This runway is going to be closed for quite some time. So why don't we pull up the airport diagram for Lubbock. I've got it open here. And let's take a look. And I'm not familiar with Lubbock either. So, okay, so they've got it shaded. You can see it's already on here. And looks like it was a very short runway that we wouldn't have used anyway. So not pertinent to us. So we'll click back over here. And we've got a bunch of towers with lights out. It's going to be daytime for sure by the time we get up there, so I'm not even going to look at those. Cranes, looks like probably no big deal. Again, it'll be daylight hours while we're there, so that's fine. And then again, a tower with lights out, we don't care. So nothing pertinent at Lubbock at all, which is a good thing. And then last but not least, I am one of the few pilots that you will run into that actually checks center Nodems, because I like to do things the right way. So I'm going to actually pull up ZHU, which is Houston Center, and I think we're landing in Fort Worth Center, aren't we? And you can see it's a ton of Nodems. I get really, really good at sifting through these. And so I'm going to just like really quickly fly through. But I'm looking for anything, any special use airspace that might be active that I already kind of know from looking at the sectional. Looking for anything, any military activity, any service outages, anything like significant like that I really think I want to know about. If I were going to fly or expected to fly on jet routes or Victor Airways, I would look to see if there were any amendments to those, but there usually isn't really much here that you need to know. Again, some people don't even check this, but I like to do it the right way and just look through. And again, I've done this so many times, I can pretty much glance at it and know right away if I need to read it or not. So I'm just looking for anything, like I said, airspace wise that looks pertinent, and not flying through any of these restricted areas. Don't care about wind turbine farms, don't care about UAS stuff. And Bullseye MOA, Kingsville, I'm not flying through any of those MOAs. And then let's see, control burn areas, I don't really care about that, and I didn't really see anything pertinent in there. So that's it for the center Nodems. So we don't really have any pertinent Nodems. And I'm going to go back to FA.gov and we'll check, last but not least, TFRs. So click on the TFR map, and you can actually just click to zoom in a little bit. You can see there is that one TFR out there on FA.gov that we saw over here on SkyVector that we're actually maybe skimming. We're just east of it, but again, if we get vectors or something, we might go through that. And it does say that it's a security TFR and it's going to be active up to 18,000 feet. And so that actually could be a little bit of a concern for us, because remember, we are flying at 16,000 feet, so we're not actually going to be above that. Typically you're above Tfrs in the PC-12, but we're not going to be above this one. So this is, you know, primarily ATC's responsibility. Well, I mean, it's both of our responsibility to stay out of it, of course, but ATC is going to have this depicted on their scope, and they're going to make sure that we stay out of it. It looks like our route of flight is clear of it anyway, so it's not something we need to concern ourselves with too much, but a good example of why you definitely always want to check Nodems. And yeah, but those MOAs are cold. We are going to be at 16,000, so we're going to be in those vertical dimensions of those MOAs, but they're going to be cold, so we don't care about that. So other than that one TFR, nothing to worry about there. And then we're going to move on to looking at the Fbos. So at Stinson, we are going to assume that, you know, since we're already at Stinson, we're already familiar with whatever Fbo we're at there. And again, I haven't been to Stinson, but it looks like there are a couple of, you know, maybe 2 or 3 Fbos. We'll just say we're at this one, so we'll know that we'll use this for our taxi planning here in a minute. But certainly flying to Lubbock, we need to pick an Fbo. So I use AirNav for that. I go over to AirNav, type in LBB, scroll all the way down to almost the bottom, and you'll see the Fbos down here. And there's just one. So there's the Lubbock arrow is the Fbo. And it'll give you kind of the little, you know, these little icons show you what they have. So they do have CAA fuel pricing, which is a good thing for corporate aircraft. Of course, you know, crew cars. And if they, you know, typically Fbos at Class C airports, any airport with a control tower is typically going to have pretty decent Fbos, like full service Fbos, because they get enough traffic to, you know, justify having that on the field, and they make enough money to keep it. So it's probably going to be a pretty decent Fbo. It looks like it's got good reviews, only 6 reviews, but good ones. And you can see fuel prices over here for Jet A. It's $4.99 for Jet A, which, you know, is kind of average. And then I always go to their website. There's a link on here for the website. I pull that up and just kind of get a feel for the Fbo. And looks like they do some maintenance and probably some flight training and stuff like that. And sometimes you can actually put in a little reservation on their website to let them know that you're coming and what aircraft you're going to be in and what time you're going to be there and all that good stuff. So this one here, this website here doesn't really have a whole lot. It's kind of more about their sales, charter avionics, maintenance, all that stuff. Click on facilities and see, yeah, they've got all their, you know, pilot lounge, crew cars, rental cars, internet, computer, there you go, free Wi-Fi, all that stuff. So it's going to be a nice full service Fbo. And another tip here is to go to Google Maps, and we're going to actually satellite view the airport. If you just type in the identifier, Google Maps will take you right there, and then we'll actually figure out where the Fbo is on the airport. So sometimes the Fbo website might have that on there. If you go down here, let's see what this says. It says view airport details, and see if they have a little map of it or something. Okay, that just took me back to AirNav. So, and also sometimes on this little airport diagram on AirNav, they'll have the Fbo locations on there. You can see they don't have any of that on here. So you're kind of on your own for figuring out where the Fbo is. Sometimes on Google Maps, you can type in the Fbo name, and it'll be on Google Places, and it'll show you perfect. There you go. That actually worked, which is good because, you know, a big airport like this, you're going to want to know exactly where you need a taxi. So here's the Fbo, and it looks like it's probably going to be a pretty simple taxi. But, you know, I like to zoom in on the ramp and just kind of get a feel for what the ramp looks like, how tight it's going to be, what the, you know, if they have center lines taking you into and out of the ramp area, that's nice to know. So just kind of gives me a heads up for, okay, looks like I'm probably going to end up parking right here somewhere coming off this taxiway. And then sometimes too, I'll actually look at, you know, some of the taxiways and runways and stuff while I have the satellite view pulled up. But we'll probably come back to this in a minute. So we'll go back over here to Stinson, and you always want to review the AFD. Some guys use different sources for this. I like to use the AFD. This is called the chart supplement now. It's the green book. This portion of it's still called the AFD, Airport Facility Directory. And I just read the entry for the airport to familiarize myself with the airport, what the, you know, what services and facilities they have there. You can look on ForeFlight and different stuff to kind of get a feel for this too, but really all ForeFlight is doing is just pulling information from the AFD. So I just go to the source. I just like to read through this. I'll just skim through and get an idea for the airport. So Stinson SSF, 6 miles south of town. There's your time conversion. The elevation's 578. There's a beacon. And the runways are, you got 9 and 27 and 14 and 32. So 927 is hard surfaced, 5,000 by 100 asphalt. So that's plenty big for the PC-12. Medium intensity runway lighting, probably not going to need that. It should be light by the time we depart. And, you know, there are PAPIs, the standard glide angles, 3 degrees to both runways. That's good to know. 1432 is hard surfaced, 4128 by 100 asphalt. So again, that's plenty of runway for the PC-12 with medium intensity runway lighting, a little bit of a slope up to the northwest, and we are expecting to take off 32. So if you're anticipating that runway, you might as well read the stuff for it. So there's a standard PAPI 3-degree glide. Again, it does slope up a little bit to the northwest. Looks like there's a displaced threshold there. So, you know, again, pretty long runways for the PC-12, shouldn't be any issue at all. You've got S4 services, which is kind of everything, major airframe power plant stuff. Jet A is available, we know that. And some lighting information from when the tower is closed. The tower should be open by the time we go. And then the airport remarks. So it's attended these hours. The little horizontal lines with the vertical through means you always subtract the 6 up here. So it's attended between these hours, right? So we would do 13 minus 6 would be 7. So that would be 7 a.m., 0700 local. To 10 p.m. So 7 to 10 p.m. is when the FBO, at least one FBO, is open. And this says numerous aircraft operations at or above 2,500 feet MSL in the Stinson Airport traffic area under the control of San Antonio approach. Well, that's kind of good to know. There's probably some military traffic in this area because Lackland is right here. And all the C-5s and stuff are flying around. So kind of a good heads up on that. And where the heck do I need to go? There we go. And let's see. And this is men and equipment working adjacent to all taxiways and ramp areas Monday through Friday between those times. So, you know, just keep an eye out for that. That's pretty standard stuff there. Airport manager, we don't care. Weather data source is the ASOS, local aviation weather reporting system. Is you can actually call the ASOS at that number. Of course, we saw that Nodem that's out of service right now. And the CTAF when the tower is closed is the tower frequency 18.2. The ATIS frequency there is 28.8. Unicom, we don't care. San Antonio approach, this is, you know, we'll know that 25.7 is the frequency we're going to use for departure. Tower frequency is 18.2, and here are the hours. So they, again, same as the attended hours. So they do open up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and our theoretical departure time here in this scenario is 8. So the tower will be open, which is good. We know we can use the tower to get our clearance, our IFR clearance and all that stuff. Ground's on 0.7, clearance delivery they don't have, so it's just on 0.7 again. It's just the same as ground. Clearance delivery phone, when the tower is closed, you contact San Antonio approach to that number. We don't care about that. It's Class D airspace when the tower is open. Other times it's Class G, and the radio aids to navigation we're not going to use, so we're not too concerned about that stuff. And it says AD up here. That means an airport diagram's published for this airport. No surprise there. Most controlled airports do have airport diagrams. Of course, we already had them pulled up, so we already knew that. So anytime there's an airport diagram published, you want to look at it and just review it. So start by looking at the airport diagram. This is Stinson SSF, San Antonio, Texas. Look at the valid times. I didn't mention it over here, but especially when I'm not looking at a physical book, I like to look down here at the valid times to make sure that the data is valid, because you never know on the internet, you know, for sure what you're looking at. So this is valid 25 February, 21 to 22 April, and it's March 6th. So this is definitely valid. And this is, again, 25 February 21 to 25 March 21. So this is a current chart. So let's assume we're on the ground here at this FBO. We'll look for any pertinent remarks first. This is boilerplate stuff that's on every airport diagram. Be alert to runway crossing clearances, all that stuff. You know, you got to read back the whole instructions. You'll find that on literally every single airport diagram in the National Airspace System. So no surprise there. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to plan our anticipated taxi route. So if we're at this FBO and we're departing 32, we're going to probably taxi Alpha cross runway 27 all the way down to the end. So it's a real simple taxi, a couple little turns. If we end up departing 27, it's even simpler, just Alpha to the end there. So no brainer on that. And then we'll go over here to Lubbock and we'll do the same thing. So I'm going to pull up the Lubbock AFD, and just to spare you the, zoom in on that a little bit, just to spare some time and so I don't bore you to absolute death, I'm going to skip this for now, but I would just go through that, AFD entry exactly like I did the other one there, just to get familiar with the airport. Sometimes in the remarks section here, you will actually find stuff that's like very useful or pretty important to know, and it's just mixed in there like it's no big deal. But you really do have to read this stuff. It can really help you out sometimes to pay attention to those details. And then we'll go over here to the airport diagram. Lubbock, LBB, Lubbock, Texas, 25 February 21 to 25 March 21. So it's current. Again, I would have looked down there at that one too. And then, so we know that Lubbock Arrow is right over here where it says FBO. That's right where it is. So let me zoom in a little bit. And let's look for any notes. Boilerplate stuff there again. Cross-hatched is non-movement area. We know that. Here's a note. Ramps are uncontrolled. Do not call for push power back. Advise ground control when ready to taxi. That's more for the airline guys. Over here, I mean, it applies to us too, but that's kind of pretty standard stuff. They, usually when they put stuff on there like that, it's because ATC is getting annoyed because people keep calling for push and it's non-movement, and they don't want to have to answer that and tell people that all day on the radio, so they just put it on the chart. So, but anyway, so we'll anticipate landing. I think the forecast was out of the south, wasn't it? Let's see, Lubbock. Yeah, so 170 at 11. So we're going to land south on 17 right here, and we'll make probably that first right at Sierra, but definitely Victor and the PC-12. We don't need a lot of runway, and then we'll make the left turn on Lima all the way down to the ramp, and make the right turn into the ramp, right there or right there. So. That would be landing here, making one of the, either the first or the second right turn off the runway, the left turn on Lima, and then down to the ramp. Looks like probably the second right into the ramp there is what we would do. And so again, pretty simple, pretty easy taxi. There are no hot spots. If these airport diagrams had hot spots on them, we would want to read why those areas were hot spots and keep those in mind. But neither airport that we're looking at today has hotspots, so that's easy. And that's pretty much it, guys. The last thing I would do on this stuff is just read through, kind of brief myself on the departure procedure here and look at the notes. RNAV 1, we have radar required. They're going to have GPS required. We have that. Takeoff minimums don't apply to Part 91. And I would just get kind of a general idea. I've got to cross Treva at or above 5 right there, and then really no other restrictions to speak of. It looks pretty simple. Just vectors to Treva, cross it at or above 5, and off you go to Alice, and then on to the junction Vortac. So it looks pretty simple. And again, we actually kind of already read through this. Maintain 5, expect the file altitude 10 minutes after departure. So pretty standard stuff there. And then I would go over here to my flightplan.com account and file a flight plan. So I'm already logged in, and come over here to create flight plan. And since we're just, pretending today, I'm just going to select for the date store hold so that the flight plan doesn't actually go into the system. But IFR, we want to have that checked. I'm going to just select November 1 Golf Juliet for my aircraft. And then departure airport as KSSF for Stinson, and the arrival airport is Lubbock, LBB. We'll hit create flight plan. And that's me, Eugene Stewart. There he goes, the PIC captain. Don't have a co-pilot. We're single pilot today. No call sign. Store hold for the date. For the altitude, I'm going to select 16,000. So for the speed here, this is going to auto-populate based on the aircraft profile that you had already set into the website before. But I would actually use the PC-12 app by Pilatus to calculate my actual expected true airspeed, and I would put that in there. 267 is probably a little bit on the fast side. It'd probably be closer at that altitude to maybe 258. Oops, not 85. Really be hauling 258, I would guess, but I would double check that across the app just to make sure I had the best possible number in there. Estimated time of departure, this is in local time, so we'll put 8 a.m. 0800. Fuel on board. So again, if I punched everything into my Pilatus performance app, it would give me an expected burn. But it's pretty easy to do without even going to the app. You can look up here. We were expecting maybe 25 or 30 knots of headwind, if you remember. So this will give you a pretty nice little estimate up here if you look on the headwind side, which are the red numbers. If you have 25 knots of headwind component, your estimated time en route at 258 knots is going to be 1 hour and 35 minutes. So, you know, it's going to be maybe 1 hour 40, hour 35, hour 40 up there to Lubbock. And at that altitude, we're going to burn maybe between 450, 490 pounds per hour. So, you know, without getting too, you know, in the weeds about it, I would say 600 or 700 pounds, right, would be a pretty good estimate for fuel. 600 or 700 pounds, let's say 700 pounds, and I want, ideally, if I can, if I'm not taking a bunch of passengers and bags, I'll just throw like 1,000 pounds of fuel for reserve on there so I can go like anywhere I could ever possibly need to go. Why not, right? We don't need that much reserve, but why not? It's not gonna hurt anything bringing it along. And so I'm just gonna put 1,700. Well, this is in time, but if we have 1,700 pounds of fuel, then we could pull up our calculator and divide 1,700 divided by 450, which is like roughly what our burn would be at that altitude, and that's going to give us 3.77 hours. So basically 3 hours and 1/4. So we'll put 0345. 3 hours 45 minutes of fuel on there. Souls on board. Let's say we're taking, I don't know, 4 passengers plus me, so that's 5 souls on board. And I'm not going to file an alternate because the weather looks so good. And for part 91, you know, we don't really need to. But let me pan up here and I'll show you. Flightplan.com helps. It's kind of like cheating, but it'll give you a suggested alternate. It's like CVN. Let's see where that is. CVN, KCVN is up here. So that's Clovis, and you can see it looks like a pretty nice, decent airport up there out to the northwest of Lubbock, and we certainly have gobs of fuel, like I just said, plenty of fuel to make it up there. So, you know, that could be a good one to use. We'd have to, you know, check into that further, but we could always throw that in there as our alternate if we wanted to, but I'm going to leave that blank since we're not required to file an alternate for this flight. No remarks, and we can't go direct, but we are going to punch our route in here. And let's see, it was the Alice 5 .junction JCT. There you go, JCT. And if you just leave that blank after that, it's going to assume that you're going direct after that last fix. So it's the Alice 5 departure junction direct, and that's what our route is. So that should be it. And it'll give you, you know, if there are any preferred IFR routes, it'll tell you right there, which is a great tool. And I actually meant to mention that at the very beginning, I forgot. But, you know, if you're flying between major terminal areas, and these don't really count. I mean, you know, yeah, they're both Class C areas. They're not like super major, large, you know, terminal areas or big cities. But if I were going to fly between, let's say, Houston and New Orleans, or maybe Houston and Dallas or something, I would definitely check in the chart supplement for preferred IFR routes. And sometimes you're going to find one between major city pairs, and it'll tell you the routing that, you know, you need to file, because if you don't file it, you're probably going to get it anyway. So it's, again, good to get a heads up on that. But you know, I didn't do it for this particular trip because I knew there probably weren't any. And sure enough, according to flightplan.com, there are no preferred routes. So I'm just going to hit press here for navlog, and that's going to kick out our little flight plan form up here. There you go, hour 31 en route. And I just go through, make sure I didn't fat finger something or screw it up. 1GJ, IFR, PC-12 slant Lama, SSF 1400Z, that's 8 a.m., 258 knots, 16,000 feet. Destination is Lubbock, hour 31 en route, no alternate. And let's see, fuel on board 345, souls on board is 5, PIC is Eugene Stewart. There's our route, is the Alice 5, junction direct. And then if you look at the 16,000 foot column here, which is what we filed for, you can see our burn. So our burn is, okay, so it's 755. So we said, you know, roughly 700 pounds, so we weren't too far off there. And we've got, you know, 1,700 pounds on board. So we've got, you know, a little less than 1,000 pounds reserve, which is like way, way, way more than enough. So 27 knots of average headwind along that that route at that altitude. So not great, but we'll deal with it. And then I would come down here and hit save and return to main menu. And there's the flight plan. And normally if I hadn't clicked store hold for the date, I could actually check a little box right here and then hit, I think, press here when done, and it would put it into the system to be filed when the appropriate time came, but we can't do that since I hit store hold. So anyway, and then we come over here to multi-printout, and I can't actually do it because, again, this isn't a real flight plan, but if it were, that flight plan would be in here, and I would click it and click like the nav log and the weather boxes, and then click get briefing, and it would kick out a whole briefing for me with all the weather, Nodems, all that stuff. And I would actually email that to myself and to the aircraft's email address. At my operator, we had, you know, an email address for the crew and an email address for the aircraft. We would send it to both. That way it was on file. If something happened, they could pull that up. And again, flightplan.com does satisfy the FAA for that you've gotten an official source, you know, officially sourced weather briefing and checked all your Nodems and Tfrs and all the pre-flight action stuff that's required. So yeah, that'd be it. And then I would do, you know, depending on your operator, you might have additional steps. I had to do FRATs, which are the flight risk assessment tools, basically a risk assessment for the flight, and put that on file. And then also, again, performance planning. So I would use the Pilatus PC-12 app for that and calculate my weight and balance stuff, CG, and then also the performance planning. So I would, you know, again, look at the fuel burn. I would look at takeoff and landing distance requirements for runway lengths and all that kind of stuff in there, and email that to myself and again to the aircraft so that that was on file. If anything happened, they can see that I did my due diligence and did all that planning. So anyway, and that would be it. And then again, maybe, you know, the next morning I would just kind of do a little bit of an abbreviated self-briefing. I would get on here and again just look at the, you know, kind of skim through real quick, look at the METARs, the TAFs, the radar, all that stuff, make sure nothing changed. Maybe glance at the, definitely glance at the Nodems again, glance at the TFRs, all that stuff, make sure nothing changed. So, but anyway, that's the flight planning process, guys. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions or if I can clarify something for you that I did or said, or if you want me to go into more depth on something, let me know. I'd be happy to. And yeah, just leave me questions in the comments. This is, again, probably part one of maybe a 4-part series or something that I'll eventually get around to putting up. And I hope this helps. If you could, please hit that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. You want to see more of this, that would help me out a lot. And yeah, that's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.